I grew up in a home where there were Buddhist practitioners as well. My Aunt Charmy and my Uncle Frank Mori. My Uncle Frank was Japanese. And they belonged to, I think, what is referred to as the American Buddhist Church, as many Japanese folks did at those times in New York, and probably still do. But I never saw it, and where I'm going was that I never saw anybody meditate. It was really much more of a cultural thing, and as well as stories that, were told to me as a child about some of the things of, interconnectedness and, stories about animals and that sort of a thing. But it wasn't until actually my husband, let me go back a little bit, my husband, when he was 18, shared that he went off on an adventure out to see, let's see, what's his name? Gosh, I'm blanking now. You'll have to remind me, Mike. What? Yes, Philip Kapleau, sorry. This is going to be an interesting evening. I'm still recovering from a very long journey. Okay. So when he was 18, he shared that he'd went out for a weekend out to see Philip Kapleau, who wrote The Three Pillars of Zen, who had a Zen center out in, I guess it was Rochester, New York. And so he would be the one that would be meditating when we finally got together. Oh dear. Okay, I'll just try to hold it. I don't know why it's doing that. When we finally got together. And I remember saying, so what do you do? And he said, well, you follow your breath. And so that's what I thought, okay, I'll try. And then it was like, oh my gosh, what means breath? I can't even breathe here. So bringing attention, as it were, to something that was such a natural thing really increased my anxiety. And so for that goes with the path. So, and when we think of concentration, we also, what may come to mind also is a striving or a bearing down, a sort of forcing the mind to stand at attention, as it were, like some sentinel, something very fixed and rigid and tight. But in actuality, it is a very gentle gathering of the mind, aided by curiosity and patience of mindfulness. And without mindfulness, which is also caring and loving attention, there can be no concentration. And conversely, on the other side of it, without some concentration or ability to gather the mind, there can be no mindfulness. So rather than a striving or a force bearing down, wise concentration requires, and this is in the language now of Lee Brasington, what he refers to is a relaxed diligence. So a relaxed where we let go, and a diligence where we hold a light attention, an attention that is also, as you may have heard this expression before, like a tuning of the lute. You may have heard that story, that is not too tight and not too loose. So it's to stabilize the attention without also increasing tension. And whether we are cultivating wise mindfulness on the pillow, wise mindfulness in full presence on the pillow, or are off the pillow trying to remember to be mindful with sati, the Pali word for mindfulness, also the word for remembering. So it's with that gathering of the mind, that gentle gathering of the mind with mindfulness and that relaxed diligence, that we also discover a calm and pleasant abiding. And in deeper states of concentration, that light holding of attention also arouses a profound joy, which energizes our ability to investigate and leads to states of calm and deepened equanimity for the practice of insight meditation, which is taught and practiced here at the Insight Meditation Community of Charlottesville and at other insight meditation centers around the country. The two types of insight practices are meditation, which does not involve thinking, and contemplations, which are focus but non-distracted forms of thinking. Both, however, can be put to use to obtain insight, in the one perhaps into what leads to the proliferation or cessation, or the cessation of suffering, the growing of suffering or the cessation of suffering. So insights into what's wholesome and unwholesome in the moment to moment, breath and in and out, and into the deepest phenomenal nature of reality itself. The three marks of existence, which we know as anicca, impermanence, dukkha, suffering, and not self, as well as dependent origination. The realization of impermanence, that everything changes, and that because of this, nothing will give us any lasting satisfaction, which is dukkha, or a bummer, as Lee likes to say. And that we also identify with what is not self, that we too are compounded of changing causes and conditions with no fixed core that we could call a fixed and separate self. So this is what we can actually not only understand intellectually, but deeply, with a very concentrated mind, experience more fully to a deeper realization of it that can be more integrated in our life, our daily life. As these are the realizations as well that lead on the path. Concentration is the eighth of the eightfold path, the eighth path, part of the path, that lead up to also what is, as Pat shared, and we will visit again, as right or wise view and wise thoughts or wise intention. Wise attention is the last step, as I said, of the eightfold path, but in reverse, going backwards, it interpenetrates all that precedes it. It requires wise mindfulness, as mentioned, and wise effort, which we may remember is paying attention to wholesome states when they have arisen and that we want to maintain, and to unwholesome states that we want to let go of. And between the three, wise attention, wise mindfulness, and wise effort, we have the triad of mental discipline, which is required for the realization of the full eightfold path, the completion, the realization, deep integration of each of those parts of the path. Concentration is also not possible without sila, which means morality. Which is grounded in the ethic of ahimsa. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. You can tell me if I am, right? Which is doing no harm. And where we also practice wise livelihood, wise action, and wise speech. Wise speech, and we may hear more about this in Susan's retreat, as she mentioned, is a particular significance now. If anybody dare turn on the radio or the TV, during these very difficult and even violent times, where with mindfulness again, we can remember that before we speak, we need to let our words pass through three gates with three questions. Is it true, what I want to say? Is it true? Is it necessary? And is it kind? For these words, as all words, can lead to wholesome as well as unwholesome actions and the full consequences of that. Ethical conduct is then the foundation also of the entire Eightfold Path, essential to and supported by the mental disciplines and leading to the deepening understanding of wise view and wise thoughts. And although it's linear in its description, whether we're moving from the bottom up or from the top down, each turning of the Eightfold Path interpenetrates and reflects the other, as in a hologram, leading, as we know, as it's named in the Four Noble Truths, as the fourth noble truth that leads to the cessation of suffering. So that's a bit of an overview and its place on the path. Samadhi, which is right or wise or complete concentration, has three depths of concentration. There are three depths, and they are momentary concentration, access concentration, and full concentration. Momentary concentration is what we might experience when we sit down and we're focused on our object of meditation, and then we hold it for a few breaths, and then we find ourselves distracted and then caught up in not just observing but caught in story and thinking and so forth, and find the need, or mindfulness then rises. Hopefully it's mindfulness, because if it's glaring and yelling at us and being harsh with us, that is not mindfulness. That's just another negative aspect of mind. So when true mindfulness, right mindfulness arises, it's a very gracious and loving attention that says, oh, can I let this go? So momentary concentration is the deepening of that ability to stay with something, and as we move to the focus is of our attention, as we sit and do vipassana, for example. A training in that momentary concentration is in a full description of concentration and momentary and access concentration is in the Anapanasati Sutta. That's a big word. Anapana means breath. Sati means mindfulness, right? And of course the patana means a foundation or the establishment. So Anapanasati Sutta is a sutta on the mindfulness of breathing. So that's momentary concentration, is something that we probably all do, and do it without even realizing that there's a name for that. The next level in depth, we're going into deeper levels of concentration, is what we refer to as called access concentration. That too is discussed in the Anapanasati Sutta. So we can have mindfulness of breathing to approach access concentration, and a definition of access concentration. There's many things, there are many signs, as it were, of access concentration. Maybe some sort of white gauze developing, but some people don't have that. In other deeper jhanic states, sometimes people talk about nimitis, and a lot of people don't have that at all. But the definition here would be when the mind is fully with the object and of concentration, and there may be wispy thoughts in the background, but those thoughts are not enough really to truly pull us away. So that would be what we would call access concentration, and we can stay there for a very long time, and it can be quite delicious. And it is also, well, I'll get to that piece. Other ways to access, to enter access concentration, to develop, to have the mind rest in that diligence, to move towards access, is metta practice. The repetition of those phrases. If you've ever been on a metta retreat, and that's what you do. I remember the first metta retreat that I did was here in this room with Sharon Salzberg. And when I learned that what that meant was I would be doing metta all day, which meant with Sharon that I would be repeating phrases here and there all day, walking and sitting and standing and so forth. That was like, what? Really? I'm going to do that all day long? I didn't know or think I could do it. It was like, I thought I'd be bored out of my mind. But indeed, I wasn't out of my mind with boredom, but I was became very deeply and richly concentrated, and with the heart fully open and receiving. So there's something special about when we do metta. It is not just a concentration practice. It is discussed that way in the Visuddhimagga, which was written between 800 to 900 years after the Buddha's death, when they categorize it as a concentration practice. So it is that, but it is also, as we know, a heart practice. So it can very much warm up our concentration as well, and open us to receiving, which is what hopefully we will be doing when we move from concentration to doing insight practice. The intention of concentration, can you still hear me? Because I think touching it may be making it pop. The intention or the purpose of concentration is not just to get a relaxed state and chill and hang out and feel really rested. That's great. I highly recommend it. But it really is to develop, to move that calm abiding, to have the foundation to do insight practice. Because if the mind is, really stirred, we're not going to have enough space or calm to be able to focus, to see clearly. It's like water that's churned up and there's mud there. So metta is a great way to mindfulness of breathing, metta practice, and that would be probably the repetition of phrases. There are other forms of metta practice where we just work with this sun, as it were, in the heart and just extend it. That's actually how it is described in the suttas. Those phrases are not anywhere in the suttas, but they are in the commentaries. So another things that we can do are kasinas. I have never used one. I don't even know what one looks like except in pictures, but they are colored discs that you would then stare at, and then you would continue to really hold your attention, and you remove the disc. You have an after image. You continue to focus on that. And that, presumably, for those who are skilled in that way or have that inclination or ability, may lead to a nimitta, which is this bright light that stays. Now, this is, again, would be in jhana states that are described in the Visuddhimagga, again, very late. Sweeping, when you do a body scan, you're actually doing, concentration practice. We've done some of that here. Pat has led, I think, concentration or, what was it, the breath of peace, that comes from Ajahn Lee, that was developed by Thanissaro Bhikkhu. So scanning, if you've ever done body scans, some people really love the body scan, and we can scan just looking at the surface of the skin, sweeping or fanning, parts of the skin. Or as I was initially trained in mindfulness-based stress reduction, we do it from the inside. That requires a little of imagination. I have no idea what my certain parts inside look like, but it's, a felt experience from within inside, basically. Nada sound, which is that sound in the ear, which I hope not to focus on, but it is because there's that ringing. And a very well-known teacher, whom you may know of, Ajahn Sumedho, who has tinnitus, actually, to deal with that challenge, that ringing in his ear the nada sound become the focus of his concentration. That sounds way not in my interest, but he actually does that. So mantras and chanting as well. Obviously, these things can, bring us into deeper and calmer states. It's also a prerequisite to get into sila is also a prerequisite to get into access concentration. And the language in the sutta is secluded from from sensuality, which means sense desires or greed. It's also listed as greed, but secluded. So it doesn't mean you're like in your own little room or under a tree, you're hovering. It means secluded from sense desires and unskillful mental qualities, also known to us as the 5 hindrances: greed, hatred, ill will, stupor and torpor, restlessness and worry, and skeptical doubt. Hey, let me out of here. Excuse me. I told you this might be. I told some friends this might get a little wild tonight. What? Baby monkey, what are you doing in here? I don't know. I jumped in the bag and I fell asleep. Oh, gosh. This is embarrassing, baby monkey. Do you know where we are? Yeah, I know. I'm right here, right now. No. Do you know what place we are? No. Come out. Do you want to come out? No, I don't want to come out now. No, come on. This is scary. Well, you're here, so guess what? What?
Do I have to?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Hello. This is tough. All right. I'm sweet baby monkey. Sometimes I'm sweet, but sometimes I'm a hindrance. In fact, have you ever heard of monkey mind? I'm famous.
Does that give you lasting satisfaction, baby monkey?
No, nothing gives lasting satisfaction. But I like it.
What else do you like, baby monkeys?
Bananas.
All right. So, are you going to tell us about these hindrances?
Well, yeah, okay. I have lots of greed.
What do you mean by greed, baby monkey?
Well, I want. I keep wanting. I want, bananas. And I get very angry if anybody else wants my bananas.
Oof, baby monkey, that sounds like a little ill will.
Yeah. Well, and I get jealous too.
What do you get jealous about?
Well, if somebody else has a tree with bigger tree, I'm even more bananas. And you know what else I also get jealous about?
What?
Wolfie.
Well, you have to tell people who Wolfie is.
Wolfie is my friend. Wolfie is my friend with Papa Monkey and all my other friends. And sometimes you pay more attention to Wolfie.
Oh, gosh. So sometimes you don't get enough attention. You're such a baby monkey. You're such a mammal. We all do that, baby monkey. We want anything that's going to get ourselves some attention.
I know. I can't help it, but I try.
So a lot of greed.
Yeah, a lot of bananas.
Some ill will.
Some ill will. But then I feel bad. Because I really like him. Wolfie's one of my best friends.
Yeah, I know. Sometimes best friends do that. Right. What else? Anything else?
Yeah. Sometimes I have a lot of sloth and torpor.
Are you awake now, baby monkey?
Well, sort of.
Did you eat a lot of bananas tonight?
Yeah.
Oh, dear. I see a little rising in the belly.
Yeah. Anyway, so sometimes I have lots of sloth and torpor, and it's because sometimes I eat too much. And sometimes, quite honestly, I don't want to pay attention. I don't want to feel all that dukkha. So I fall asleep.
And then what do you do, baby monkey? Can you do anything about sloth and torpor when you find out you're in a stupor?
Yeah. I can.
And what we can do?
Yeah. You can stick your head on water. You can pull your earlobes. You can stand up. You can look into a light. And you can just go to bed if you're really tired.
So that's sloth and torpor.
Yeah.
So some of this has to do with not wanting to deal with things that are painful.
Yeah. Greed is like that too. So is ill will and sloth and torpor.
And then what's next? Anything else?
Yeah, restlessness, That papancha-cha-cha.
The what?
Papancha.
Baby monkey. It's not papancha. It's papancha.
Oh. Okay. Papancha-cha, papancha-cha. You know what papancha is? You can't stop. The mind goes nuts. Greed, ill will, whatever. Fantasies. Going to Honolulu.
Have you ever been there?
Yeah, lots.
Okay. It's called papancha.
Okay, I know. But I like to have fun with it.
I know you do, baby monkey. So, and worry, is there some of that?
Yeah, lots of worries sometimes, like, what if? What if this happened? And what if that happened? And even when I imagine myself off to Honolulu, I think about, okay, once I'm there, then it's going to also be over. So, I don't know, have you ever done that on a vacation? That's really suffering. And then the last one, it's pretty tough.
What's that?
Skeptical doubt.
What do you doubt, baby monkey? You try to learn the teachings.
Yeah. No, it's not so much about the teachings. I love the teachings, actually. It's about myself. What do you mean? Well, because I'm a baby monkey. How can monkeys wake up? I mean, I'm a monkey. And I'm famous for monkey mind. Is it possible? Does anybody else have a monkey mind out there? Because I'd like to know. Because if you can work on waking up, so can I. Anybody? Raise hands who doesn't have it. Hey, you know what? Maybe they have baby monkeys. Well, they may not have baby monkeys, but they may have baby monkey mind. Pa-pancha, so sometimes I doubt myself. All right. Well, that's pretty harmful. All of these things are pretty harmful, baby monkey. Wow, that's a lot. So how are you feeling? Hungry. Do you have any bananas? No, I don't. Do you have any dog biscuits? No, I don't even have any dog biscuits. Oh, okay. Whew. Would you like to take a nap? Yeah. Would you rub my belly? Yeah. My head too? Yeah. So that's baby monkey. You don't want to wake him up. Too much papancha-cha. So, yeah. So the hindrances, and in order to even access concentration, we need to be somewhat more secluded from the hindrances. In fact, it is a prerequisite actually for access concentration, and it is as well for the jhanas. This is not the monkey, huh? I know. Okay. Is it mine? Maybe so. Take this baby out. Okay. Can you hear me? Okay. So the third level of concentration is a much deeper state of absorption. So we have momentary, we have access, and we have what is actually in the suttas referred to as the definition of right or wise concentration, and that is the first four jhanas of what I have been trained to call the sutta jhanas. These are the jhanas that are described in the suttas. They are not the jhanas that are exclusively, some of them are, but certainly not the first jhana that are described 800 years later in the Visuddhimagga, 800 to 900 years later that are described in the Visuddhimagga. When between the death of the Buddha and the monks hanging out, they had a lot of time after they built their monastic settings to sit for hours and hours and hours and hours, and maybe, if you're lucky, after 3 months may enter into the first jhana. That doesn't seem very pragmatic, and nor was it, in my understanding, the path that the Buddha took. You may remember when he was practicing austerities at the brink of death, starving himself, where you turn sideways, you could barely see him, just ribs. He had a memory of himself as a young boy sitting under a rose apple tree, a memory of himself in what was described, would be described as the first jhana, where he was experiencing both rapture and happiness born from seclusion of the hindrances. So that memory brought him to a realization that it wasn't austerity, perhaps, but that perhaps that was the path to follow. That was the middle path. And certainly we know it is a very important part of the path, very much the Eightfold path, and also is one of the 7 factors of awakening. So the right concentration, and I'll read this. This comes from, I cribbed this, so I may tweak some of it, but wise concentration is explicitly defined in the Maha, which means great,
Satipatthana Sutta. And again, sati is mindfulness, and patthana means foundation or establishment of mindfulness. So in the greater Satipatthana Sutta, and in other suttas as well, but it is described as jhanic meditation. So this is a quote or a translation by Lee, I believe. And what, monks, is right concentration? There is the case where a monk, quite secluded from sensuality, secluded from unskillful mental qualities, enters and remains in the first jhana, rapture and happiness born of seclusion, accompanied by initial and sustained attention to the object of meditation, which could be the breath, or it could be some of that metta. So you can hear here how the first jhana, as an access concentration, is born of that same seclusion. And it is a state of which the jhanas that erupt from that concentration, that come to you through that concentration. These are natural states. They are altered states, but they are very natural states. And the first four jhanas are also referred to, or called the arupa, not arupa, the rupa, a meaning not, that would be the remaining four jhanas. But the first four jhanas that are described as right concentration are rupa jhanas. They are experienced in the body as sensations, so they are embodied. The rapture is piti, and it can be like it could be very strong. I had the privilege, and it was really quite wonderful to sit the last 2 weeks in a retreat with Lee, in which I sat in on the interviews with Lee. I know my own experiences, I know his, but I was privy to the exploration of people who were attending the retreat, sharing their experiences, some of them very new. They'd never been on a concentration retreat, never mind a jhana retreat. Some had been practicing for many years, and so there was a wide range of experiencing. So that first getting getting into that first jhana, the first and the second jhana, once people are able to do that and find their way, it's a roadmap. It really is a roadmap into that. They then discover that the rest of it comes to them a lot more easily. They have cultivated the ability to hold their attention and to be with what is, So that piti, though, can be a range of sort of warmth and rising, or it can be this real sort of this very extensive, like electricity running through the body. Some people experience it very intensely and find it very unpleasant, especially if there isn't the other piece in there, which is the happiness, which is sukha, which softens and rounds it out and sweetens it a little bit. So entering into the first jhana is quite doable. And it is also, as we said, born with those hindrances suppressed. So one of the benefits of doing concentration in general, and I would say especially when you are working at the level of access and maybe then moving to jhanas, is that not only are the hindrances suppressed, when we have the taste of that, we know what it feels like not to get so caught up in all that wanting, all that greed, ill will, all that restlessness, agitation, and worry. We experience ourselves without that. That in itself is itself a form of insight, a knowing. It is also the I in the jhanas becomes diminished more and more the deeper we go. So there is a less ego-centered perspective that can arise when we come out of the jhanas and go into insight practice. Because again, the intention of any concentration practice is to deepen our capacity for insight, to penetrate at a deeper level and realize it, embody it, know it, not just intellectualize it, not just read it in a book, but to know it so that it can shape, it can be a part of this awakening together where we can more easily let go. So letting go is at the heart of the practice. And the Sutta Jhanas as I started to say, were a heart of the Buddhist practice, as well as which he discovered as he sat under that tree, as he sat, remembering himself sitting under the tree as a young boy, and where, when he was dying, the Buddha had a lot of pain. Is my understanding, awakening is the cessation of craving and clinging, but it is not, which is suffering. But there's still pain in the world. We're still going to get old, we're still going to age, we're going to get sick, and we're going to die. And the Buddha knew pain, he knew physical pain, he walked everywhere, he had terrible back pain. There were times, supposedly, when the Buddha would ask his attendant, Ananda, as well as Sariputra, his right arm, to do the teaching that evening, and he would lay down, and then he would come back and he said, yes, that's what I would have said. He also, when he was dying, it was also in a great deal of pain. There was thought that he was poisoned because he took a plate of pork. Because when you're on alms rounds, you don't pick and choose. You are very gracious and you take whatever has been offered to you, that acceptance of someone's generosity. But it turns out, it appears now by the descriptions, some scholars are thinking that it wasn't that he was poisoned, although there are indeed in the Buddha's life attempts on his life. It was that he had a myocardial infarction, which some friends of mine, some physicians have also, said is a deeply painful thing. So he, one story he goes up and down the jhanas, meaning he goes up to 8 and then comes back down to 4, though why in someone in all that pain would want to go through all of that, and when you could just end up in 4 and go to 4 more simply. And that's supposedly where he rested as he lay dying, where in the 4th jhana, we'll get there is no experience of pain. In the 4th jhana, there's only stillness. So going back to the 1st jhana, there is that rapture and happiness. In the 2nd jhana, which again comes through a foreground shift, the happiness moves more forward, the piti lessens. And that's a thankfulness for a lot of people who experience that piti as being plugged into a wall socket. So the sukha comes forward more, the sweetness, the joy comes forward more. It is the 2nd jhana that then is not born of seclusion. It is born because the hindrance is already suppressed. It is born of concentration. So what does this say? That when we can let go and hold a light, a caring attention to what the object of meditation in this case would be, what it would be, mindfulness and the breath in the beginning, to go into the 1st jhana, it might be a sensation of pleasant, wherever we might feel pleasant. Often that's that half smile of the Buddha, When we smile, actually, even if, it actually releases endorphins. So smiling is a very instructive thing for us. So it could be focusing on the pleasure of that. But I don't want to get too involved in the teachings because, just the how-tos at this point. But having to say that the 2nd jhana, you have the sukha, the happiness more in the foreground, and you have the piti lessen somewhat in the background. So it's a little more, not as electric, not as, ecstatic in that way. So you're beginning to get a sense of just a little bit more peace. It is where we have also what is referred to is that unification of the mind, that unification of awareness. So it's written here, with the stilling of initial and sustained attention, because that is not needed here as well, he enters and remains in the 2nd jhana. Rapture and happiness born of concentration, unification, he says here, of awareness, free from initial attention and sustained free from initial attention and sustained attention, internal tranquility. So what you're focusing on here is the pleasant. You're focusing on the pleasant that may be rising and experienced in the chest area. It may be, there's the rising is some of that PT, but it may even has a feeling sometimes people will describe like a little fountain in here, just kind of, it's really still, but there's still some of that the feeling of joy is there's still a little bit of that activity, but it's still a very tranquil state. So that's the second jhana. And when we find the keys to the first and second jhanas, it really increases confidence. In fact, the first jhana, it increases or access concentration. When you're there and you know that you are with the object of meditation, there's a peace that arises there. It's already the beginning, and we call that joy pamoja. It's the kind of joy that we know from when we gladden the heart. That's a pamoja. That's the happiness of wholesome thoughts and wholesome actions. It's the gladness of coming home in that way, out of believing in and acting out of our basic goodness. So that is that's that normal joy. So it's not as if in these states, these jhanic states, we are experiencing something new. We know joy, we know tranquility, we know stillness, but in the jhanas, it is experienced as more sublime states. It's more intense and more sublime. And they are also conditioned as everything else. So then we move into the third jhana. And to move, you're not doing anything. You're just either shifting your focus. I'm going to hold this, sorry. We're just letting go and shifting focus here to not the whatever still moves in terms of the piti, but of the sukha itself. So the third jhana is a place of deep, deep tranquility. It is also, and I'll read this from here, with the fading of rapture, that's that piti. He remains, or one remains, in equanimity. This is the first taste of what, in the jhanas, the two phases of the equanimity. That is mindful, in which we are mindful and clearly aware, and physically sensitive of pleasure. We enter and remain in the third jhana, of which the noble ones declare, equanimous and mindful, he has a pleasurable abiding. Sukha, when I listen to others describing, what can I do? Is there anything? Take it off my ear. Yeah, okay. Is this better? I'm so sorry for that scratching. Okay. And I will try not to move this. Okay. Okay. As we're talking about rapture, right? One side. To the side. Okay, that's it. Can you hear me? Okay. So with the fading of rapture, and hopefully this electricity here, we remain in equanimity, mindful and clearly aware, and physically sensitive of pleasure. He enters and remains in the third jhana, of which the noble ones declare, equanimous and mindful, he has a pleasurable abiding. As I started to say, many folks will describe this state of, and it's a state, they will describe this state of sukha, is so very pleasant, sometimes it's hard to let go. But it actually will have its own ending in any case, as they do. So there's not, in that sense, a clinging to these jhanas. I mean, we can certainly get caught up in that, but guess what? That's a hindrance, and guess what? Pop, we're not in the jhana anymore, right? So any of that tension that occurs in a jhana will pull you out. Now, if you have been doing this for a long time, you can catch that possibly with that mindfulness that's also operating here and find your way back into the jhana. If it's just a quick pop, you can sometimes get back. But having said that, this is a delicious state. To move into the fourth jhana, if we have a smile on our face, the half smile of the Buddha, or we're experiencing the pleasure in any way in our body, we relax that entirely. We take our focus off of any kind of pleasure and let it go. And the path, of course, is always about letting go, right? So we letting go. We let go and we let go. And in that letting go, we also may have a feeling of sinking, as the feeling, the midsection is often where people will describe, not necessarily, but they will describe it there. Of course, we want to saturate the full body with the first jhana, saturate the full body with the piti and sukha of the second jhana, and of the third jhana, which is just the sukha, but we often will begin to experience it in the lower belly, or the lower half. So the letting go, and there may be a sensation of dropping. We may have this felt sense. I think there's a description of kind of like sitting on the side of a well and then dropping in. So it is, but with no ground to hit, so it's not like you're gonna, bang and get hurt. So there is this letting go. I image sometimes, Alice there, just letting go, falling. And it is the deepest state of equanimity of those 4 jhanas, and sufficient. The first 4 jhanas, as we know, are sufficient to cultivate or to penetrate, do insight practices, to understand at a deeper levels the nature, the phenomenal nature of awareness itself, as well as insight practices, as I think I said, can be of different kinds. They can be both contemplative, they can be meditations in which we're not thinking, and contemplative in which we're thinking, but it's a focused, non-distracted thinking. So the 4th jhana is described with the abandoning of pleasure and pain, as with the earlier disappearances of elation and distress. He enters and remains in the 4th jhana, and this is the purification of equanimity and mindfulness, where neither pleasure nor pain remains. This, monks, is called the right concentration. It is, and I will bring this to closure now, it is an understanding or a recognition that, as with the 7 factors of awakening, joy and relaxation through concentration leads to deepened equanimity, and it is there that we can reside to do insight practice. Equanimity is often even referred to, I remember Gil Fronsdale said this, as a pseudo-nirvana, because it is so still, and it is where we can catch even the nuances of wanting, even wanting perhaps to stay in that state of equanimous. But when we're doing this work, when we're doing any level of concentration, or which involves pamuja as well, anything that arouses wholesome states and lets go of negative states, we are changing neural pathways. So whether we are in a jhana or access concentration or doing in momentary awareness, we are shifting and deepening those neurons that bring us a deepened awareness of joy that is not, in the case of certainly access and the jhanas, that is not dependent on anything external. This is all within. Pamuja is from without, but this is all from within. But the combination of the both is very essential to awakening. So I hope you will open to some of this joy. And thank you for all this also electricity here. I'm sorry for that. Baby monkey thanks you too. Bye-bye. Namaste.